Well, today I'm going to have to be removing the steering rack. If you're wondering how to get to this point, basically all you have to do is take out your intake tube. Take out your intake tube, take out your intake. What I'll quickly do is I'll put in right here how to remove your intake. After you've removed your intake, these have to be pulled back like so, compressed, and these should wiggle out. They're not easy by any means. But what they do is they pull back, you compress, and you wiggle them out. So like I said, slide back, compress. You gotta keep wiggling. Don't have anything in your hand. You don't want to accidentally put it through your radiator. There we go. Just has to break the pressure. Then there's this one. Make sure that's there. There we go. Felt that click. This one will be the most fun. What you need to do is get a hook pick, and there's a little red safety in there. Hook it in, pull the safety back, and compress. It's best to crack these loose on the floor if you don't have an impact gun like this. So what I would normally say is before you lift your car, go ahead and break them loose. If you're wondering about jacking up your car, I have a video for that. I will show it in the description. Don't want to waste your time just in case you know how to jack it up. But basically, loosen up these bolts and don't take them all completely out until they're all cracked loose. Or at least leave one in, apparently. The other thing you can do is put your leg on it like this, and that way it's not going to just fall off the rim. This is a good time, especially if you have these factory Corvette rims, inspect them because they're known to crack. Next, turn your wheel all the way this way, loosen this screw off. If you want, leave it on by a couple threads, turn it, go to the other side, and pull out the other one as well. Next part is by far the scariest part if you have carbon ceramic rotors like I do. You need to hit this with a mallet right here so this joint drops. So be extremely careful hanging right here. Look at that. It's now free. You need to hit it with good force. Do not hit your rotor. That's why I'm doing it right here, not here, not there, because if you miss and you hit that rotor, especially if it's carbon ceramic, oh, that's a bad day, and definitely not in paradise. Next thing you want to do is move this wiring harness up. Compress right here, and then lift this lever, and as you leave it like this, it should slide out. Perfect. We can now get that up and out of the way over here. Now that that's over there, you can see we have a bolt right there. We're gonna have to loosen this bolt, and we're gonna have to loosen that bolt. I suggest loosening those two. And we're also, see that steering shaft right there? We're gonna loosen that because we're gonna have to pull that shaft off. Now when we do that, one thing I'm gonna tell you to do is, just to be sure, take a strap or anything that you got and hold this steering wheel in position like this. The reason why is if this steering wheel turns, you can not only throw out your steering, but you can throw out your clock spring. So you want to make sure that we take this and you can hold it to anything. Even take the strap if it's gentle, and you can wrap it around there just to make sure nobody turns that steering wheel on you. Once you got those bolts loose, next thing we need to do is have an area for this to actually slide out, because right now, well, there's no way it's gonna come out. So we have to take the sway bar off. So to do that, if you look down here, you need a flat blade, and there's a little groove in these little pieces right here. Watch this, here. Let's see if oh, well, apparently I just launched it into there. Anyways, what you're doing is, let's see if we got better lighting here. You lift that ring, just like so, and then slide this forward. And while lifting. So what it is that's kind of like a little eccentric strap that sits in here. Just like that. Let's see if we can get it there. And of course it'll open up. Now that we've done that, we can start to get access to our sway bar. Now we don't have to take our sway bar off this mount. What we need to do is there's a bolt that comes up here into the frame. That needs to be taken out, and this bolt right here needs to be taken out. So I'm gonna take out this one, and then I'm gonna take out that one. I'm gonna do the same over here. That one, and the one coming up. The other thing we're gonna have to do is take off the end link. So we can get this bolt properly, because you have to hold this and get in there with a box wrench. Right here is a T, I believe it's a 15, and there's 2 on the very bottom aiming up. Go ahead, pop that out in the 2 right here so we can get this plastic cover off. If you want, you can try and break the tension with impact first, and then after that, 18mm box wrench and an 8mm to hold the tip, and then you can just loosen that off while holding it here. Again, just right up there. If you got your impact, pull that one out, and then the last one will be right here on both sides. After you get those bolts out, the sway bar literally kind of rolls down. You have to finagle the end links out of here, but it will come out, I promise you. And like I said, you just wiggle and it just kind of rolls out. Anyways, now that we're here, what I would suggest you do is measure from right here to right here. And the reason why is then you know about where your steering rack has to be once you bolt it back in, so that way it lines up properly with the steering wheel. So again, measure from right here to right here. So if I'm looking at this tape measure, see I'm about 12 to 12 and a half. If I go like this, yeah, I'm more like 12 and a half, 12 and a quarter. Anyways, and again, that's measuring from a solid piece, which is not being removed, to your steering rack. Actually, look at this. If I put it underneath, it's right at 12 and a quarter. So once you've done that, and you know you're at 12 and a quarter, now you know up top, when we go to put the rack back in, it goes 12 and a quarter on the driver's side, and that way you know where to slide the shaft of the steering back in for the wheel. Still lock your steering wheel so that way you don't mess up your clock spring. Ta-da! Like I said, just like that. There to there, used a piece of speaker wire. That way it's got a soft jacket on it, not gonna harm anything, and it's not gonna move. Now, if we come over here, we still have our 12 and a quarter measurement there. Then we come over here and we're gonna slide this off of here. First, if you haven't yet, crack that bolt loose. Last but not least, we're gonna have to remove this bracket temporarily while we remove the steering shaft here. So to do that, what you're gonna have to do, and what I would do, is we're gonna have to temporarily support this. And I'll show you what I end up doing, whether it's with my hand or whatnot. But basically what's gonna happen, we're gonna loosen those bolts, and then we're gonna slide that out of the way. So disconnect these two, or as I should say, loosen them. Loosen the 2 on our ABS. Then we're gonna take those bolts completely out, lift the booster up, slide out the rack, and hand thread 1 or 2 of those bolts back in loosely just to hold on to this. So that way we don't have to worry about the rack or the ABS module here bending those brake lines. So let's show you how I got it out. Flexed this out just a little bit, just like that. After you flexed this out, just so it's like this, you can move the steering rack out of the shaft. Bolt has to be completely out. After the bolt's completely out of there, you can literally slide it over here to get that motor away from the biggest point here. You drop that end down, and as you're dropping it down, slide it out and roll out just like you did your sway bar. And that is how you get your rack out. This will make it a lot easier for if you're installing a motor or if it's a manual because you have to slide it more forward. When you're bringing the steering rack up, pretty easy. Just make sure you move the this piece out of the way a little bit. What I ended up doing was I slipped the steering rack up and back to where it was. Really easy. And then after that, all I did is I just threaded in the brake booster or the ABS booster's bolts so that way it'll hold it up. And then From this point, double check your measurement we took earlier. Mine was between 12 1/4 and 12 1/2. As long as I was in that little margin of error, no matter what, it was gonna line up with the shaft. It lined up with the shaft because I tied off the steering as I showed you earlier. Now that I've done that, we're gonna go ahead and get these bolts threaded in. Get them threaded in and I'll give you torque spec after. Just to lubricate the threads, and then go in a tiny bit of blue Loctite just so you don't accidentally strip them. And what you're gonna wanna do is lift the steering rack a little bit as you thread these in. If you go ahead and just start trying to crank these while it's setting on that A-arm, you might strip the threads. You wanna kinda just hold it a little bit with one hand while you're doing it. This is an example of what I mean. Taking the pressure off the bolt and hand threading it in. Do not just start trying to do it with an impact. We're just gonna cinch those things down and then we're gonna grab our torque wrench. First thing to bolt up is that ABS bracket again. Go ahead and get these two to 27 foot-pounds. Throw a tiny bit of blue Loctite if you so wish. Next, let's get our sway bar ready. Note the difference in sizes. These two are going to be for going up for the steering sway bar, and this is going to be for the actual rack. You note the size and difference of the bolts. Don't try to jam those guys in with an impact or you will cry. Torque spec on those two bolts, 97 foot-pounds. The steering rack clamp right there, make sure you crank that down to 43 foot-pounds with blue Loctite on the bolt. Pre-Loctite these bolts so that way when you lift the sway bar into position, you'll be able to just thread them in. Make sure your sway bar lands on the other side of this so the steering rack sits on top of the sway bar. You get my drift. Now that we've got that sitting like that, and we've got these just hand threaded in right here, we can now thread in our sway bar, those big long bolts. So throw a tiny bit of blue on there and then tighten them up. Once you're done, put them to 97 foot-pounds, between 90 and 97. The last bolt, which is the one that's right here, and then same with the other side, go ahead and put them at 37 foot-pounds. After you've done that, you got these at 37s, this one's at 97, and then you've got 97, which is on the steering rack. You're doing pretty good. Let's move over to these ball joints. Now these ball joints, these are gonna be fun no matter what you do because they try to spin. So you have to hold it. So you're not really gonna get a torque wrench on there. You just wanna make sure you get on there pretty good. And if you really want to, and you wanna make a headache for yourself, but it'll make sure they don't back off, go ahead and what you'll do is just at the threads near the end of them, throw a little bit of blue Loctite and it'll just lock these nuts in there. If you want, go ahead and put the sway bar one in first. I find it's the easiest. Just go ahead, sink it in. Then you take, like I said, just a tiny bit, just like that. And then now you can go ahead, take the nut, and now it's added it to it. Now you can try and crank that down. All I did is I held onto it and I gave it as much as I could with my wrench. So, and that's with one hand, because one hand holds this and the other one holds this, and you just give her whatever you can. And that little bit of Loctite should help lock it in. But just remember, whatever you do, don't go anything above blue. If you go red, I can't even say. You will hate life. I will say that. Go to the other side, do the exact same thing. And other than that, it's just plugging in the wiring harnesses again. That's all the screw specs you need from me. Make sure you get both sides in before tightening that bolt. If not, you'll have to use a pry bar and just use it right here. Lift up and you can pop it through. But that's what I had to do. I had to lift up using pry bar right here and then squeeze it through. When you're putting all your plastic trim pieces back on, whatever you do, do not use Loctite and tighten them with a screwdriver. Don't use a ratchet, you'll snap the heads off 100%. And again, no Loctite. Quick couple things, when you're tightening this up, watch this. The lever should pull the connector in when you go. If it doesn't pull the connector in, it means it's not locked in proper. Once it squeezes down, you're good. Now with these big guys, ignore the fact my wiring harness is everywhere. It's because I'm doing some engine fun. So squeeze this in, pinch that down. Squeeze this in, pinch that down. There, it's now locked in. Now that this is all locked in, you come over here, if you move this, and just squeeze that back in the hole down there, and you're good to go. Other than that, I'm not putting in my gas struts right now, but when you put them on, just extend this out as far as it'll go, pop it into that ball, pop it into the ball down there, and when you pop them on, all you do is sink them on. That's all you should have to do. If anything, you might have to lift that clip a little bit, but you shouldn't really need to. But that is how you pull out that steering rack and put it back in. Whatever you do, when you put these connectors back on, just make sure you sink those safeties. This one auto kind of goes in, but yeah, all the other ones, make sure you sink them in. Anyways, thanks again for watching.